Yes.
Good morning, everybody. One second. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the General Plan Review Committee. Thank you for your patience. I have some news to share with you. Drew and his wife had their baby girl last night at 11:48 p.m. I had predicted 3:18 a.m. Had that child been born at that time, he was going to name the baby Carrie Ann. So I lost, so the name of his daughter is Lula, so we're very happy for him. So if you could all be patient with us, we are trying to improvise today on the meeting, and we will do our best to be as efficient as possible. Drew helped set a high standard, and we will continue with that. So just give us another minute. We're waiting for a few people to jump in, and I'm getting a couple text messages from you about not being able to log in. So 1 second, and then we'll go ahead and start with some introductions. Supervisor Brandon said that he was unable to log in because he doesn't have the link. Are you able to resend that to him? Okay, great.
Tony Hernandez told me he won't be here till 9:30.
Oh, okay.
Parks.
He's had digital almost 30 years, and he knows all the history and maintenance and all that.
Okay. Well, we're doing schools first, anyways, right?
Are we?
Are we?
Are we?
I assume I have chapter 5 in front of me. I thought we just went over
We are going to, so he's not going to be in until 9:30.
No, he has to leave.
Yes,
Okay, well, let's get started. Yes, leave it at 9:30. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're just making sure that everybody is logged in. Good morning again. I want to thank you all for being here. Sorry about the delay. We're just kind of recalibrating with Drew's happy day of having his baby daughter. So a big good morning to all of you. I've already taken roll with the committee, and so what I'd like to go ahead and do is turn this over to Sophia to go ahead and introduce some of our guests today. Sophia.
Yes, good morning, committee. It's great to be here. Please do bear with us as we jump in here on Drew's Happy Day. Today we're talking about parks, open space, and schools. And our subject matter experts that we have here today with us are many. We have Debbie A. Stone with Fresno State, George Cumming with the State Center School District. We have representatives from the Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control District, as well as we hope to have John Shelton from the San Joaquin River Conservancy. We have also invited a representative from Fresno Irrigation District and Fresno Pacific University. Let me know if I missed anyone, as I undoubtedly have.
Okay, great. And who do we have on staff on the call?
Yes. In addition, from the South.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Oh, I don't?
No.
Okay. In addition, from city staff, we have Tony Hernandez and Christina Chamberlain from the Parks Department. We have Jill Gormley here, and possibly a larger team from Public Works. We have Brock Buki from the Department of Public Utilities. From planning here, we've got Assistant Director Mike Sanchez, Architect Michelle Zumwalt, Casey Lauderdale for our planning team. And I think I will stop there and ask if there is anyone that I missed.
Did we miss anybody?
This is
Yes, it's Mike Carbajal with City of Fresno Department of Public Utilities.
Hi there.
Good morning.
and this is John Shelton with San Joaquin River Conservancy. Joined a little late. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. Anybody else from City Staff that we might have missed, or anybody of our guests?
And hi, Carrie. It's Ruthie. I also joined a couple minutes late.
Hi, Fresno Unified. How are you? Thank you, Ruthie.
Great. Thank you for having
being
us.
here. Good morning, Debbie Gatestone. I see you there. Good to see you.
Good morning, Carrie. Thank you so much. Good to see everyone.
Good to see you all. Anybody else that we might have missed so we can make sure you're here and say good morning? All right, folks. Well, thank you again. We're going to go ahead and jump right into the first slide. I'll get that to you. I'll send it over to him. We're trying to get somebody online. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and as you know, we're going to be reviewing parks today, open space and schools. So we're going to go ahead and turn this right over to Sophia to get us started. Mike Sanchez to get us started on parks. Mike?
Actually, it's me.
Oh, you're going to handle the first
Yeah,
part?
I'm going to do the first part.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning again, everybody. Next slide, please. As Drew always does, a reminder of the purpose of the committee. The City Council of the City of Fresno hereby establishes the General Plan Implementation Review Committee, comprised of 17 members, 2 appointed by each council member and 3 appointed by the mayor, to discuss the progress toward implementing the policies of the general plan and to make recommendations to the mayor. Next slide, please. Thank you. So today we're looking at Chapter 5 of the General Plan, Parks, Open Space, and Schools. And we'll be talking about just briefly the relationship to the overall goals of the general plan, a bit of summary information, and then we'll jump right into the meat of it, which is the objectives and policies. And by the way, I don't think I introduced Sherry Vick, who's at the controls and helping us out quite a bit. So she's here too. So the preamble of the Parks, Open Space, and Schools element is right here. It sets forth policy guidance for a broad spectrum of open spaces and community facilities in Fresno. These spaces will provide areas appropriate for agricultural or resource production and conservation, parks and open spaces for recreation, areas for protection of natural resources, and school sites which support neighborhood identity and cohesion. A key need addressed in the element is the shortage of parks and recreation space, particularly in established areas of the city, and a lack of access to these facilities for all Fresnans. This element aims to provide those special places that support a sense of community and are vital to creating a livable and sustainable Fresno. Next slide, please. Each element has its relationship to general plan goals. There are several here about protecting, preserving, and enhancing historic and cultural resources. General Plan Goal 7, providing for a diversity of districts and neighborhoods, and an important element of that is parks. Next slide. Also, more on the importance of parks as an element of complete neighborhoods, healthy neighborhoods, providing a sense of place, and that provide as many services as possible within walking distance in our neighborhoods, and that includes parks. General Plan Goal 9 is promoting a city of healthy communities and to improve the quality of life in established neighborhoods. Next slide, please. I think we skipped. There's one right before that. General Plan Goal 12 is resolving existing public infrastructure and service deficiencies, making full use of existing infrastructure, and investing in improvements to increase competitiveness and promote economic growth. General Plan Goal 13 is emphasize the city as a role model for good growth management planning, efficient processing and permit streamlining, effective urban development policies, environmental quality, and a strong economy. Work collaboratively with other jurisdictions and institutions to further these values through the region. And finally, General Plan Goal 14 is provide a network of safe, well-maintained parks, open spaces, athletic facilities, and walking and biking trails connecting the city's districts and neighborhoods to attract and retain a broad range of individuals, benefit the health of residents, and provide the level of public amenities required to encourage and support development of higher density urban living and transit use. So with that, we'll just provide a couple of summary points. One of which is that the open space element is one of 7 required general plan topics required by the state, and all 7 elements are there. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to remind the group about the Parks Master Plan. A Parks Master Plan was completed in December of 2017 pursuant to General Plan Implementing Policy Parks and Open Space 1B. And the highlights of that Parks Master Plan include that maintenance and life cycle replacement is very underfunded in our park system. An estimate of park acreage needed to meet the general plan standards is over 1,000 acres today and increasing to 1,700, almost 1,800 acres in 2035. Areas of Fresno have, some areas of Fresno have limited or no parks, creating park deserts, most notable in districts 1, 5, and 7. Parks are highly valued by the population and the people that we talk to in that process, and Parks Department staff operate as best they can with limited available resources to provide unique experiences to the community. Those are just some of the highlights. And next slide, please. Just as a reminder, the parks level of service standards that are called out in the general plan are 3 acres per 1,000 residents for pocket, neighborhood, and community parks, and 2 acres per 1,000 residents for regional, open space, natural areas, and special use parks. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike Sanchez.
Good morning, everybody. This morning we're talking about parks, open space, and schools. There's 9 subjectives I'd like to get through this morning. And without further ado, we'll go through these. The first objective is to provide an expanded, high-quality, district-wide park system along with various recreational opportunities for the entire Fresno community. Slide. So before you is the number of accomplishments that are pertaining to that particular objective. And with that, we'll go ahead and open it up to the committee for any questions they may have on this particular objective.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Just for a point from the committee, were you able to hear Mike Sanchez?
Not very well.
Not very well. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just make sure from back there he could come forward and take off his mask. Okay, sorry, we're working in City Hall. We have some new parameters this week. So what I want to do is go ahead and open this objective up to the committee. Mariah, I'll start with you because I know you had submitted some questions. Would you like to start with this first objective, policy 1?
I can. I didn't really break down my questions / comments per policy. So should I just make my overarching comment now?
Sure, go ahead. Why don't we go ahead and do that, and then that way we can go ahead and we'll start with you. That sounds great. How many do you have? I didn't get to review all your questions that you submitted. So. Okay,
yeah. So my overarching concern is that from my read, the chapter doesn't comply with Government Code 65560, which is the requirement for open spaces elements in the OPR guidelines for a number of reasons, primarily because it does not contain an inventory of the specified categories of open spaces. So there's a number of open space types, which are open spaces for natural resources, for managed production of services, outdoor recreation, public health and safety, military support, tribal resources. And the chapter does acknowledge the existence of these different types, but there's no inventory. And so the inventory specifically must include any parcel that is in one of the categories that is essentially unimproved, and it must designate any that are designated on any local, regional, and open space plan also. So those are laid out in the Government Code 65560 subsections. And there's more information about what that has to include written in the OPR guidelines. I don't recall this being in other parts of the plan, such as the land use element. I just didn't remember it from previous sections. And so if it is somewhere else, I do apologize if I've missed it. But yeah, so that's just my overall concern with it. You know, it needs to include that inventory.
Okay, so let me have staff jump in. Who would be your
Parks,
all right? Who is it?
Christina or Tony?
Tony, do you want to hop in on this and maybe give us some clarity to that question?
Well, I mean, from a park standpoint, I mean, we do have an inventory of what we have now, and we also have a small list of undeveloped sites for future park use, but all those other categories where we don't have anything.
We don't have anything in other categories. We don't have anything.
What she meant, yeah, pretty much what parks has is an inventory of what we have now, all the amenities at each park, park sites, future park sites, partnerships with flood control on some of their basins, those type of things. But that long list, we don't have anything on that as far
Yeah.
as
And it shouldn't, I mean, and this shouldn't just be limited, this isn't limited to the parks. You know, this is for the open space element, and the open space element is for the entirety of the jurisdiction. So this responsibility shouldn't be falling on the Parks Department.
That's good. We want to start there. Is our legal counsel on the line this morning? Leah? Anybody from the city attorney's office?
No.
Okay. All right, so we did see that yesterday, so we're going to have to come back and give you some additional information. I think it's a very good question that you actually asked in the email. So what we'll do is get back to the committee. We'll get some answers as we go try to answer all the questions that we haven't been able to answer.
Sounds good, Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah. Hey, Mariah, that was really great. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
And I think it's, I just got it. Okay, and I have a question for you. So the government code, this is a relatively new, when did the government code become enacted? Do you know? Because I think it was after the general plan, is that correct?
Well, the government code requirements for general plans have been around, but there was a update of them in 2017. I don't, I could compare versions of it, but I don't think that this aspect is particularly new. Reviewing the 2017 OPR guidelines, at least it didn't state that this is one of the newer developments. I know things like Government Code 1000 with the general plan requirements for the environmental justice chapter were new, but I don't think that this was. However, I think, you make a good point. If this wasn't a requirement at that time, okay, that's a different thing. But, I do know that, the open space element has been required and would have had additional mandates beyond just the parks designation. So this chapter really focuses on parks, but there's a whole other, the conservation aspect that should be included as well.
Totally understand. And so, yeah, so we have other people in other rooms today. And so we'll get back to you. Some of these items that you mentioned are considered new guidelines, but what I'm going to do is maybe we can pause with this and then get back to the committee with more information just to see what we need to do. And also, it might be some good information that we pivot over to the general plan update when we begin that process too. Does that work?
Yes,
Right.
that's fine. Yes, that's good. Thank you, Carrie.
Appreciate your patience on that. Gracia, you're next.
Thank you.
Morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I have just first a quick question regarding how and when do you want us to do motions and recommendations? Is it at the end like last time?
We're going to do it all at the end just so we can kind of go through the information for the chapters, and then we'll keep all motions for the end of the meeting if the committee would be okay with that. If you need to chime off a little bit early because of work obligations, please feel free to let me know so we can make sure we get your motions for the record.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Carrie.
Appreciate that. Daniel, you're up next.
Oh, wait, I have.
You actually have a question? Okay, great.
That was just a logistical question. I specifically, it's a question regarding POSS 1-F. I see that there's a lot of different components to it, and I think I just generally I want to know how is it that the city is implementing, determining when a park space is needed or not needed in a community, and then how often has actually been carried out where a designated park space with its dual designation ends up being something out. Like, do we know how often that's done, or how many parks that has happened since the general plan was implemented?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna need that.
Yeah.
So let me.
Yeah, Mike's gonna hop in.
I'd like to try on. So the question is, how often has that happened? Typically, when we have parkland that is it's usually dual designated for a park site or some type of underlying land use, like typically residential. Typically, when that property is ready for to develop, or the property wants to come in and do something with that, they pose a question to the city, specifically parks. Is the city ready to develop this park? More often than not, we are not in a position to do that, and many times we have to kind of let that project go, and so on and so forth. Since the adoption of the, I don't know often as we'd have to go back and get that exact number. I don't believe it has happened that often, but usually parks has a pretty good idea of the sites they really want to develop. But I don't know how often that has happened in the past since 5 years. But in the past, prior to that, typically questions would be asked of city management is the city ready to develop this park site? Sometimes the answer had to be no because the funding wasn't there, and in essence, it was ultimately lost and replaced somewhere else. So, but we do have to. I'll try to get more information on that as to how many we have lost in that scenario.
Thank you. That'd be appreciated. And
was some of the no's because of maintenance related issues, Mike?
Correct. Yeah, because it's not just about having money to buy a property for a park. It's actually development of the park and the ongoing maintenance, which has been a challenge for the city for the past several years, as we're all well aware.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we'll have to continue having the conversation about, Mariah and Gracia, is about how do we, when we build a park, how do we properly fund the maintenance of it, particularly in new developed areas. So I would look to the committee to maybe come up with some thoughts and recommendations on that as well as we continue the conversation. Did you have any additional questions before I move on to Daniel?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Daniel. You're on.
Hey there, Carrie. Can you hear me?
Barely. Could you speak up?
Let me see. Hold on 1 second.
That is so much better.
Oh, wow. This any better?
Yeah, that's really good. How
Okay.
can you answer your face this morning, though? What's going on?
I will actually turn my face on, and there we go.
We appreciate that. A lot of you are being very shy, by the way, this morning with the camera. No brownie points for cameras off today.
I know.
Okay.
I haven't been able to get a hold of my barber, so I'm like really trying to keep the top of my head out of the screen.
All you have to do is a number 2. That's it. All right.
Yeah, I should get back to it. Anyway, regarding, I was just going to reiterate the question that I had from email, which was, let me pull it up. It was just in the general plan itself on tables 5-2 and 5-3, they have the existing park inventory at the time the general plan was adopted. And why is this? And I was wondering if there was any kind of current, present day status on what those numbers are and the categories that were presented. It was the city park space and the ratio per 1,000, like overall city park space, and it includes a breakdown by category, and then it also has a ratio per 1,000 residents, and then it has information about park acreage in the various development areas that are delineated by the general plan. So the questions were, does the city perform regular monitoring of the park space, like on an annual or biannual, any kind of basis, and just whether there are any more recent numbers available, because I was having trouble finding them if they were available. And then if they do happen to be available, if we're seeing any changes, like hey, we've made not just, hey, we built this park, but we're actually seeing like a metric that's, our metrics are doing better? Or has there been for any reason, like any parkland converted to other uses that the ratios have gone down or the numbers have gone down?
Thank you. Tony, do you want to take the first stab at that?
So everything that is spelled out in the Parks Master Plan that was put out in 2017, and that's pretty current. The only changes that we may have done is added amenities like shade structures or replaced tot lots, but we haven't developed any new parks. We are in the process of design, in a design phase for, I believe Quigley was one park, and we have a vacant lot on Milburn and Dakota that's in a design.
I'm very familiar with that one. Yeah.
But no new park. We haven't added anything, and we haven't lost anything.
Okay.
Tony, is there a push right now to put more of a focus on park maintenance or rehabilitation than there are new parks at this time because of funding?
Well, no, there is no new resources for maintenance, and it's also, it's spelled out in the Parks Master Plan that we are underfunded. So again, we're just trying to hold things together, I guess, be the easiest way to put it.
We know the Parks Department's severely underfunded, and hopefully we're able to address that. Daniel, is there any follow-up question to that?
Carrie, this is Christine. I do have just a comment for Daniel's question.
Please. Go ahead.
So in regards to the table where the statistics were for so many park acreage per 1,000, that isn't something that, I don't believe that that's something that gets regularly updated whenever there have been additions to the park sites, as far as whether it's expanding, like with Maxiel, we did acquire about 0.29 acres. So that doesn't automatically trigger like those statistics that you're referring to. Those don't automatically get updated. Or like when we had Martin Ray Riley or Inspiration, those things as far as what was in the general plan when it was adopted, those have not been updated that I'm aware of. That would be maybe something that planning might do internally, but I don't think there's a trigger that is, broadcast like, oh, this now increased our overall thing. So I think those are typically updated when we do a more formal update review of our general plan, and or as Tony mentioned, through our park master plan, there may have been some modified statistics that were updated at that time, but in the park master plan. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Got it. We have an additional staff member here that's going to add in some additional comments, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is Michelle Zamot. I'm an architect in the long range planning team. And we did update it in 2018. And as Christina and as they commented that, they haven't done any improvement or added any much parkland since the Parks Master Plan, but we did include Martin Ray Riley and Inspiration in the one you see in the Parks Master Plan, that table that you're referring to. In that table also are community facilities district parks. So there's the ones that the subdivisions develop. So as those have been coming in, we've added those. But the table you see there, we do update it in. We keep it updated in our files, but we haven't updated it in the last year and a half. So that's just wanted to know.
I appreciate that. Any follow-up questions, Daniel, before we move on to Darius?
I was more just the only thing would be if there's a way to have those numbers like be a little bit more public facing. I know like indirectly when they come out with whatever the park score numbers, and I know that the city works to improve is constantly working to like improve its showing there from whenever I mean, we still get kind of trashed in those metrics, and it's not always fair the way that they're presented. But it's yeah, I mean, it's just because of how major of a concern it is, and this is one of the areas where we actually like have a relatively straightforward metric for how well we're doing, and that's not this, and it definitely is understandable on the funding side of the equation. There's been new stuff that's opened up, like Prop 68 and TCC funding. I know that Dakota Milburn Park you're referring to, that I'm hoping that's going to be in not going to be thwarted due to COVID or anything for Prop 68 funding, and already the stuff that's going on with Quigley, and hopefully that frees up more of the maintenance money for that side of the equation. But yeah, in short, I'll save it maybe for a motion thing, just something to make that more public facing, because it's.
And I don't know if that has to be so much of a recommendation for the general plan as a motion, but it could be a recommendation for staff as they're looking at updating that. So let me.
And it doesn't have to be like a monthly park land report, because it definitely doesn't change that fast. But yeah, that'd be that. And I do appreciate all the work from the park staff that we've done a lot of stuff recently, so that's good. I think that does it for my range of questions right now.
Got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I know that some of you are asking questions about other parts, so I'm going to be super mindful of that as we keep track of time. Darius Assimi, you're up next.
Good morning, everybody. Great discussion. So I like to see more parks built in new development, more parks and trails and better connectivity. All new homes pay a park impact fee, and I believe it's $4,000. And only a portion of that becomes applicable as fee credit. So to get more parks, and by the way, the beautiful thing with those parks, they're 100% maintained by funds coming from those home buyers, those homeowners. To see more parks, more trails in our new developments, wherever they get built, I like to make a motion to get 100% of that park fee creditable, so that immediately those parks get built with every new development, parks and trails and connectivity.
All right, we're going to come back to your motion at the end. We're doing motions at the end, unless you have to chime off early.
Unfortunately, I have to jump off at 10:30, unfortunately, this morning.
Okay, so for the record, can you repeat the motion so we could?
Yeah, the motion would be to get 100% park fee credit for new development, and make sure that those dollars go to building parks and trails in new development.
Okay, I'll need a second.
Can I make a friendly amendment, and I'd be supportive of seconding if I can make a friendly amendment to where the fee is actually more flexible in, I think we all recognize, and in reading this chapter, we recognize the stark divide between, the Fresno of where there's park space and where there's not. So would you be open, Darius, to actually amending it to where the fee is more flexible and not just specifically for that new development?
I think currently, the fee goes to paying off debt and a few other things, and I think all those things wind down in the next few years. So let me ask you this question. My goal was to get let's say you have a new development in Southwest Fresno coming up. From day one, there's going to be a park in that development that everybody in that development can use. Now they actually don't have to use the bigger parks. They don't have to drive. It reduces VMT, GHG. They don't have to drive to regional parks to do that. They get a park built in their neighborhood, which makes the neighborhood even more walkable. So maybe if there's an option in your friendly amendment to say 100% of the money can go to that, and if the home builder, chooses not to put a park, then it goes to a park in that region. Is that what you were thinking, Christia?
Kind of, yeah. I think I'm in the line of like, how is it that we develop parks equitably, and we don't further exacerbate, the difference of how much park acreage certain communities have. And so, for instance, if Southwest Fresno did get a new development, and that funding would be spent there because we recognize that park space there is lacking. So I guess it would just be like, add the flexibility just so that recognizing the inequities of open and green space that South Fresno communities have.
So let me just one comment, and then I would make an amendment. So new home buyers are tagged with that $4,000 a home park fee because the assumption is that they're driving to and using the regional parks. So my motion is that if we have parks in each development, then and I can say this from experience, almost everybody ends up using that park. By the way, the parks we built, which is in almost every one of our neighborhood has one, they get used frequently, even if in the heat. I mean, all kinds of activities take place in the park. It's a great social gathering. But not all developments pay it. I think you have to have X number of units or X number of acres to qualify. So some of the smaller developments don't end up putting up in a park. And so they just pay park fee, and that money can get used anywhere. So my motion is, maybe with a slight amendment, to 100% of the money to go as fee credit for building parks on site, parks and trails. And if the builder, and if there's still enough dollars, or the builder chooses not to, then those dollars to be utilized in that area. And I don't know how to define that area, but in that, maybe it's that district, council district. I don't know if there's a parks district that can be set up that way. Does that make sense, Gracia?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Darius, and I think I would like it to go a little bit further. Just as you were mentioning, like new developments as well as more established neighborhoods all would love to have a park in their neighborhood to be able to walk to, and it would be very well used. And so I think giving the first choice for it, whether to be developed in the new development or within and again, I also don't know how to generally quantify the region. I think in the chapter I was reading that there's generally some flexibility as some new guidance as far as how those dollars can be used. But so I think I would like it to go a little bit further, and for that reason, I cannot second your motion, Darius. I'm sorry.
So and let me ask you. So your question is to use the money to be for the development first, and then second to go into existing neighborhoods and add a park space, which means maybe demolish a home or create park space in existing neighborhoods. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but the latter, if anything. So not to where it's prioritized for new development, but to where it's in general. And generally, there's an assessment of like within. And I don't know if this is how the law is written, but like if within this region there is this neighborhood just half a mile away, and this neighborhood does not have we recognize they do not have access to a park within half a mile, those funds will be used for that neighborhood versus the new development that may have a park within half a mile, so something along those lines. And I don't know if there's someone that is familiar with the language that is in here as far as like the flexibility of those dollars, of the impact fees. Does someone happen to know that? Because that would help me out too.
If Andrew is on the line, which I believe he is, he can give maybe a brief overview of how and what we do with our current fees, and then I do have a comment after he speaks.
Good morning, this is Andrew Bonelli with Public Works Department. I can answer some of those questions. I manage the city's impact fee program. The state law requires that the money that's collected from new development serves or benefits those new homeowners. So we cannot collect impact fees and collect impact fees in Copper River or some new growth area and spend that money in the Fresno High area. The state law just doesn't allow it. There is an exception if it's like a regional sports park or something like that, but otherwise it has to serve the entire community. I mean, we could take impact fees. Our impact fees don't pay for swimming pools, but if they did, we could build one city swimming pool and fund that because we could say that serves the entire community. Otherwise, you can't build a park. And one of the issues that we have with spending 100% of the revenue from impact fees in the development is the need for sports facilities. We typically, in the new developments, we get passive parks, play structure, maybe some area to play catch or something, but we don't typically get soccer fields or baseball diamonds. And we have a great need for those facilities. And so some of the funds need to go towards building those community parks more so. Our park fees don't pay anything towards trails, the current format. We do not collect fees for trails in any way. So that's all based on a Nexus study that was done. We'll be updating the Nexus study next year, and there may be some opportunity to add trails, but it would increase the amount of the fees. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
So let me just go back then maybe to my motion. So it would be to have 100% of the money available to build parks and trails in new development, since those homeowners are paying for it and they can use it. And if the park and trail is there, they'll end up using that instead of driving to other destinations to use it, which again reduces VMTs. So the motion would be to do that. And then if there's overflow dollars, then for those dollars to go into, refurbishing or building parks in that area. And I don't know if how we could divide that area. Is it by council district or some geographic? Maybe for today's motion, I just say leave it by council district because I don't know of any other mapping system. So that would be my motion. I don't know if Gracia, is that good, or anybody else?
Yes, I wanted just to make a couple of quick comments. And while I can appreciate absolutely what is being talked through, is one of the strategies that, and I appreciate Andrew bringing this up because that really is a pointed of how and where in the method and funding to do what we would categorize as a community park, in that one of our highest needs that was identified is the need for additional soccer fields. And so when we look at our planning, most certainly our long-term planning, we should be really identifying where we would plant a community park, which would be, certain acreage that would feed and serve all of those surrounding neighborhoods. When we restrict the funding solely to the individual subdivision, whether there's 25 homes or 250 homes, will vary what improvement will be within that subdivision. And most likely they are going to be those smaller, what we refer to as like pocket parks, very handy and usable for the neighborhood. But then they have even further to go if they wanted to do any kind of tennis, soccer, those more at where you would find in larger parks. So there's a balance in how we plan and where we would plant those community parks that are bigger than a neighborhood park that would serve all of those surrounding neighborhoods. So most certainly in our growth areas, that is something that we as a city and through the discussions that we had through the park master plan, we need to be better in identifying those up front so that as those subdivisions come in, we're putting that money aside to improve this bigger park in phases with those funds.
Christina, you make some great points. I'm very supportive of actually helping build more facilities in that neighborhood. And most of the parks we build are about an acre. Some are smaller, smaller pocket parks, but where there is room available, gosh, you just gave me a great idea. I mean, we put basketball courts in. We're looking at other outdoor activities. Of course, we have play equipment for kids. but you know, a soccer field. Some of the parks we build are actually large enough and large enough to accommodate a soccer field. That could be incredible and multi-purpose. So you can play soccer, and then when people are not playing soccer, it could be, you know, throwing the ball, frisbee, you know, walking your dog, etc. So I think my motion would, I like it to be, so parks and trails, 100% credit. If there's overflow to go into, because some builders may not want to build any parks or trails, because you have to give up land to, you know, and the home, so you're not building several homes. Let's say 5 units per acre. Every acre you remove, put a park in, you're eliminating 5 homes. So
can you do me a favor and be concise with your motion so there's not confusion?
Yes. So I'm sorry. Thank you, Gary. Here's a concise motion. 100% of the funds to be used for parks and trails within that new development. If there's any overflow or the developer elects not to build parks or trails, that money then to be spent in parks and trails and park amenities in that council district.
I would ask that you remove in the council district.
Okay, so in some geographic region, I don't know how to.
If you want to do a geographic region, I might suggest the development areas, since they're spelled out in the plan and they're maybe not as subject to getting changed in the census. Like
there you go, development area.
I don't know if that's any better or not. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to get to other hands here. I want to go back to, because we have a friendly amendment to a motion that I need to take in order. Gracia, do you accept that, or what would you like to ask, or no?
I think just thank you, Christina, for laying out that information. I think based off of what Christina and the way that the Parks Department strategizes of building these larger community parks, that, you know, kind of like foregoing a few neighborhood parks in the aspect of like hoping to develop these bigger parks that serves a larger area, I think I'm going to have to forego seconding the motion, just simply because I recognize the law does impede us using those dollars in a way that I think to really, you know, create that equitable development of park space in communities that currently don't have it.
Okay, thank you. Only regarding the motion, is there a second to the motion? I know that Jeff Roberts, you need to unmute if you're going to do it. Jeff, are you seconding the motion? Can't hear you. Okay.
Yes.
All right, we'll put that in the bucket. Is there any other questions regarding this motion? If so, please unmute yourself. If you have questions regarding other items, we'll get to that in a second. Anybody else on this motion? Okay.
This is Andrew Benelli again with Public Works Department. I would like to give you a little background. About 10 years ago, the city borrowed a substantial amount of funds to build parks. We built Inspiration Park, several parks. The Garden Loop Park was built, and the city has quite a bit of debt. About half of the park impact fees that we collect are used to pay off the debt. We have, I think, 12 more years of payments on that bond. And so if we spend 100% within the existing or the new subdivisions, we won't have the revenue to pay off the debt. Some of the money that was borrowed was for existing neighborhoods, so it's not eligible for impact fees. So we are paying half of the debt with general fund and half of the debt with impact fees. I should also point out that our impact fees, we do not collect any revenue for parks less than 2 acres. Those are considered pocket parks. So the impact fees don't pay for pocket parks. They do pay for community and neighborhood parks. So that's over a 2-acre park or a 10-acre park. We do not collect any revenue to pay for regional parks. The city has 2 regional parks, or maybe 3, Woodward, Roding, and the sports park, the regional sports park. Those are the really large parks. We don't collect revenue to build any additional regional parks. All of the impact fee money that we collect is for community and neighborhood parks. And again, as I stated earlier, we don't collect any impact fee revenue for trails.
Okay, so I just want to make sure my motion is clear. So I don't want to specify any size for the park. No minimum limit. So if somebody wants to, really the drive is to encourage park building with new development, which is the most cost-effective way of getting parks. And by the way, these parks are public, so anybody from the neighborhood, existing neighborhoods next door, can come and use these parks. And we've seen that happen in almost all of our neighborhoods, especially the one at Copper River. People come from all over town to play basketball at the Copper River Park. So I don't want to put a minimum limit on there, and make sure they include trails. And then, so Andy, about 1,000, City of Fresno issues about 1,000 permits a year, roughly. I think that's the number, average 1,000 to 1,200. So those new home buyers are carrying half the debt service on these 3 or 4 major regional parks that the other 500,000 Fresnans use. Is that correct?
It is correct. The half of the parks that the city built with the bond funds are in new growth areas. So half of the debt is paid for out of impact fees. The other half of the debt is paid for from general fund.
Okay. All right, folks, just as a clarity, we are not here to talk about impact fees, folks. We're here to talk about.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. I've allowed for lots of flexibilities. Please talk to your council members about impact fees.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, good. What I'd like to do is we have some guests here from our school districts that are on the line. We're gonna forward a little bit and come back to the parks. But what I want to do is, for Daniel and for Mariah, if you could just hold your questions for now. And your hands are up. Darius, your hand is still up. John Shelton, I want to make sure I acknowledge you. Your hand's been up for a while. How can we help you? How are you, John?
I'm doing good. I just walked out of the room to get my coffee. So this is not on the motion. This was just some of the questions we were talking about earlier on updating the amount of parkland that's out there. And one of the things I have talked to some of the city staff about, also making sure that we include the San Joaquin River Parkway area that the Conservancy has bought and has available. I think at this point, I very much agree with some of the discussions that you were having on how to pay for the maintenance. Got to remember that the Conservancy, we have over $30 million worth of bond funds to buy and build things, but we don't have any money or very little money to maintain things. And so I think with the fees and other things that may be developed through developers on areas, really, if there's any way to be able to get some of that into maintenance, and especially maintenance of regional parkways, that would be a good thing. Big part of the reason I raised my hand is because of some of the way the discussion was going. I've had discussions with, mainly with the Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy, which is down in Southern California. It is one of the state's most successful conservancies. What they have done is they have developed several joint powers authorities with the local agencies, local cities, sometimes counties. And in doing that, they're able to raise maintenance funds by actually having things, like the Parks Department does with the city, that, you can get fees for use fees and stuff, but there's a lot of ability to do even more with the JPAs. And I have talked to both county supervisors that are part of my board, and I have talked to Mike Kerbasi, who's also now the chair of my board, about doing a JPA between the city and the 2 counties and the San Joaquin River Conservancy. And it sounds like there's a real good chance we can go in that direction. I think the potential to be able to get large development fees that come into us is pretty easy on the Madera side, since we have new developments being built out there and they want to tie into the parkway. We only have a few areas left on the Fresno City area that's like that can then get part of this process. But I think overall it gives us an avenue to be able to gain some of this. So just something to keep in mind as we go through. And a reminder to the whole committee is that, even though we're kind of limited geographically, we're on the north end of Fresno, building things and buying property having the funding for that, we can do that. It's the maintenance. So when we're looking at trying to get some new parks, even some smaller parks along the riverway, we may be able to help you with that with some grant funding. And there's only one part of our grant funding that's competitive. Everything else is just a put together a concept and then work it through the process. So just wanted to add that.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Let me see here. And before I thank you, John. Also, Sal, I'm so sorry. It's taken a while to get to you. You put your hand down, but did you want to add anything to this topic, or do you want me to come back to you later when we come back to parks?
No worries. Let's keep moving. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Sal. We have a member of the public. It's David T. David, if you could please unmute yourself. And I don't know your last name. Say your last name for the record.
Hey guys, this is David Taub calling just as a citizen. I'm not sure if this is, I have a more general comment about the parks, so I'm not sure this is the right place for it. So I'll wait for your advice if this is the right time just for a general comment about parks and the general plan.
Yeah, go right ahead and ask it since you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, I appreciate you know, unfortunately for me, when it comes to parks and general plan, there's not much credibility based on an incident that happened in my neighborhood. In the 2035 general plan that was passed in 2014, the plot of land at the southeast corner of Temperance and Shields was designated for a park. You know, it was nice and green, and a lot of people in my neighborhood moved in that area as the neighborhood built up in the late 2000s, thinking, well, one day there will be a park in that neighborhood. Well, this past year, a developer wanted to build in that area, and the city council voted to pretty much ignore what the general plan said, and it's not going to be a park anymore. It's going to be houses. So, you know, even though the general plan designates areas for parks on unbuilt land, it just doesn't, there just seems to be, you know, ways they go around it, loopholes they can find to say, you know, when a general plan says it's a park when it's not really a park. And, you know, I think a lot of people in my neighborhood are still unhappy about that. So I think that's consideration when the general plan designates certain lands as parks. How are you going to preserve it that parks are actually going to be built there instead of some kind of decision made in the future to eliminate what the general plan designated those lands for?
Yep.
And that is my comment. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And that's a really good question. Do we have it? And do we back to Steph, do we typically, is there a land swap when land, I know when we talked about the adoption of the general plan, when land was designated, sometimes there would be a swap or somewhere else. Do you think, we don't know, I don't know specifically the project. Is anybody on the call from staff?
I'm familiar with that project, and I know that when it was being designed and developed, we did incorporate some linear park strips that provide some connectivity around the neighborhoods. But again, going back to what we started this conversation on, the city wasn't in a position to acquire the necessary property to park development.
Okay, well, thank you, David. We'll bring that back to the committee. I think that's a really excellent point. And I think that also council members and the planning commission have some real obligations to ensuring the integrity of the general plan, but also the Parks Master Plan. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm sure the committee will want to revisit that point. So hope you're able to stay on the line for further conversations after we talk about school. So committee, if you please be flexible with me, we're going to go ahead and fast forward so we can talk to our school representatives who really need to get back to work because they're trying to get school ready to go. We're going to go to policy 8, if we can fast forward to that. And for everybody else, if you're back here for parks, please hang on. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back. I just want to make sure our school leadership is able to hop back to work. All great conversation today. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Okay, so objective number 8 is simply say work cooperatively with school districts to find appropriate locations for schools to meet the needs of students and neighborhoods. And next slide, please. And there you see the list of accomplishments that have occurred since the adoption of the plan. So with that, I'll turn it back over to committee to answer any questions they may have.
Yep. Any member of the committee have any questions regarding our partnerships with school districts? We have some folks on the line. If any member of the folks from the school district would like to hop in, that would be great too. Any questions? One of the biggest things for me, and I'll jump in real quick, is for all of our partnering school districts, as we look at getting new development online, when we look at building new homes, 400, 500, 600 homes, I really think it's imperative that we look at the impacts of our school districts. Not all school districts have an opportunity to build new schools right away. They don't have the bonding capacity. They just don't have any resources readily available. So I do think as a city, we need to work very closely with the school districts, developers, to making sure that these homes that are coming online are not going to negatively impact the schools and create overcrowding, because we know there's no state matching dollars any longer for new school construction. Some school districts have to try to pass bonds every 2 years, and some don't have valuations because growth has been relatively slow in their area. So building new homes without school capacity, it does nobody any favors. So we'll talk about that more in a motion later, but that's been my biggest concern with our local school districts. Not necessarily Clovis or Fresno, but I do think of Sanger and Central and things of that have to have a bond every 2 years. But if any of the school district folks would like to chime in about new school construction and the resources that are available or not, feel free.
Hi, Carrie. This is Ruthie.
Hi.
And you stated it very well. Currently, there are no additional state bond funds to match either modernization or adding new school buildings on existing sites or new sites with the failure of what was unfortunately named Proposition 13 back in March. However, Fresno Unified did pass our local bond, and so we will continue to move forward with funding 100% the school site that was already planned for in Southeast Fresno. And we are also looking at one additional elementary school in the center of the city somewhere, but site has not yet been even whittled down to to the potential site. So we appreciate all of our partnerships with the city. We know it's best for the community and particularly for our kids, the joint use agreements that we do have and have, we'll continue to work diligently to maintain a positive outlook on all of this. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Anybody else from any of our partner school districts that'd like to chime in on that? All righty. I don't see anybody. Moving forward to the next. Thank you, Ruthie. Policy 9.
Yes, hopping off now. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
So objective 9, work with California State University, Fresno, and other institutions primarily in Fresno to enhance the city's workforce, job creation, and economic development, as well as its image and desirability as a place to live. Next slide. And there you see a list of the accomplishments that have been done with respect to this objective. So with that, I'll turn it over to the committee.
Any members of the committee have any questions for city staff or maybe Fresno State?
Carrie, this is Debbie, if it's okay. If I
Debbie,
could.
I would love for you to chime in. Thank you.
Thank
you.
And appreciate all the work of the committee and the staff. If I'm reading these accomplishments correctly, and I hope the city staff can be able to help me here, it seems like these are mostly referencing Fresno Pacific University. And if it would be helpful, and I did communicate a little bit with Drew about providing any accomplishments that Fresno State has been able to contribute towards these as well, but I didn't know how specific you wanted to get about institution, or maybe just more in general about how the higher education institutions in our area here are helping to support. So might kind of start there.
Yeah, so if you'd like to get some general overview, and I think, Debbie, what we can do if there were specific real accomplishments that you'd like to send along to Drew and maybe copy me, I'll make sure that we get an updated slide to the committee, if that's okay. I want to be respectful of your time.
Thank you. And also too, we work very closely with our district and council member Capriolio, And we also have quarterly meetings with the mayor and the city manager and director of public works. So I feel that we've been very fortunate with our representation and our collaboration with the city of Fresno and the planning staff and the utilities and public works and everyone in trying to ensure that we are collaborating and complementing how we can help to support our city and how the city's been supporting the university. So I just want to echo that and say thank you, because we've been able to, I think, really make some important improvements, and the communication is real time and not having to, wait for a general plan amendment or wait for something to come about. So just really appreciate that collaboration and partnership.
And we appreciate all of your support and that of President Castro and Mrs. Castro. I will say the biggest thing that I've noticed over the last couple of years is actually the coordination between all of our educational partners. Not only am I an alum of Fresno City College, but I'm also an alum of Fresno State. So the fact that community colleges and the state and Fresno State are really collaborating in making sure people transfer quickly, get in and out. So I think it's really been remarkable that all the leadership has really been working together. I really want to say thank you. It's almost unrecognizable when you look at the collaboration now versus 10 years ago. So I really want to applaud you, your team, and everybody in education for really trying to do all that they can to making sure we're touching every segment of our community. So thank you, Debbie, for that.
Thank you, Karen. A big thank you to President Castro and his relationship with the other presidents and chancellors in the area too. Everyone, as you well stated, working very collaboratively together, and it's just such an important resource to be able to have for our students and to be able to support them in any of their educational, goals and aspirations, and making sure those pathways are efficient and they know where the resources are to help them.
Agreed. And then I speak on behalf of the entire committee. We want to wish you and the entire team at Fresno State and all of our educational partners a really good start to the new academic year, what you guys have been through to try to make sure that our future leaders have the best tools at their disposal is really appreciated. So thank you so much for your time. I don't want to keep you on the line, but are there any questions for Fresno State from the committee at this time? I'm not seeing any hands. Going once, going twice. All righty, thank you, Debbie, and to all of our educational partners. You guys are more than welcome to sign off. So thank you very much, Debbie.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, and glad to follow up if there's anything that comes up after we sign off.
All right, thank you, Debbie. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, please, committee members, send your thoughts and prayers to all of our educational leaders as they start off the school year, and let's hope that our internet connection works well for all of them. We're going back to policy number 2. You guys have been awesome. Awesome today. Every day. There we go.
So objective number 2, ensure that adequate land in appropriate locations is designated and acquired for park and recreation uses in infill and growth areas. Next slide, please. And there you see a list of accomplishments related to this objective. So with that, I'll turn it over to the committee for questions.
Okay, folks, we're going to open this back up. I know that we've had some thoughtful conversation about residential development and open space dedication, parks and rec priorities. We haven't really talked about freeway landscaping. That's a hot topic in town, right? If you've looked at our freeways, that could keep me going for a couple of hours. But I'd like to open up to any questions on policy 2. Mariah. Hi, Mariah.
Yeah, hi. So I have a comment on the freeway concept of siting parks adjacent to freeways.
Yes.
So particulate matter emissions and other emissions from roadways can travel quite a long ways. I think that federal DOT found it's somewhere around 750 meters, 1,000 meters, something along that range. I'd have to pull it up, but I didn't. And I think that there's a serious concern of siting recreational uses, especially uses that children are going to be, taking advantage of near freeways. As an environmental justice advocate, we spend a lot of our time advocating to not even put residential or schools next to freeways because of the significant number of emissions. And so the idea of placing parks or recreational facilities next to freeways is really concerning to me, especially if that is going to be utilized as a way to try and put parks in, low income or disadvantaged neighborhoods that do not currently have enough park space, but are already have pre-existing overlapping pollution burdens that lead to very high levels of asthma, heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. So I personally I don't support this policy. I don't think we should have this policy. I think this policy will hurt people. And I believe that we can do better than to have something like this.
Yeah. What policy are you referring to for clarification?
So I have it listed as POSS 2D.
Just a sec. Let me. $2D. I think it's a great point. Okay. All right. Creation opportunities near freeway corridors. Negotiate with Caltrans, other public agencies, and private property owners to develop or remediate policy parcels along freeway corridors for appropriate recreational use. Got it. Okay.
And if I needed to provide the committee with the data from DOT about this and about the health impacts, I could, if that was something that was important to the committee for me to do to basically support my position.
Yep. I think that would be great. So let me see. I think we have a staff member. Is it Brock? I want to make sure I have a. Is he a staff member?
Yeah, staff member is DP.
I think he has his hand up. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, Carrie, I just wanted to note on policy 2-F freeway landscaping.
Oh, okay.
That as part of the expansion of our recycled water project, that we are providing interties to 99 and 41 for irrigation, so that they could hopefully replant appropriate materials along the freeway, and that we are also kind of positioned to make an extension to the Freeway 180 also to provide recycled water for irrigation there as well.
Got it. Hey, don't log. We're going to come back to you in a second, so don't log off. I want to get back to Mariah's comment. Mariah, what I'm hoping to hear from you when we take motions is a motion to change that policy. So I'm hoping that you're going to be prepared to do that at the end of the meeting.
That's fine. I think we should just remove it.
Well, I would be happy to support you. So on that. So Christina, did you have a comment regarding this?
I was just going, and I'm trying desperately to find if we have it in where in the park master plan, but that was one of the things that through our public engagement with the adoption of the park master plan, that was one of the areas that was kind of a conflicting of, being health in regard to healthy and environmental things that we're wanting to have as our priority, to the point that's being made exactly is what I thought we called it out in the park master plan, that would be one thing to be mindful of when we do our general plan update, is to also look at that policy and make some modifications to that.
Because I think we got some criticism on the park that was established right off the 180 in Chestnut, because it was right off the freeway. In fact, the on-ramp is right next to the park. So I think that was the last park I recall that was right off the freeway. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if that was the last one, but I do know that, or I believe that part of the idea with that whole concept was more of accessibility, ease of, access right off of the freeways and all of that kind of thing. But it's kind of now changed with regard to a lot of the input and momentum that we're going as a city too. So.
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that. I just can't imagine running 2 miles and then having all those cars zooming past me and I choke to death. So Mariah, so thank you for that. And that was not meant to be a dig on anybody. That's just me. So Mariah, let's get Mariah toward the end. If you want to make a motion on that, I'd be happy to support you on that.
Right. Right, and I'm happy to see that there's kind of, it sounds like near a consensus on that.
I believe so, and I think I'm really happy. I think staff has worked really hard to making sure that our future parks, when resources come in line, are in a good, safe location. Let me see. Mariah, did you have anything else, or can I go on to other?
I do. It's a little bit of a holdover from when I had my hand raised up before.
Okay, I'll have to take a full
So I guess 2 questions. So in regards to the identification of underutilized or vacant land that can be used and developed for parks, which was written on page 5 through page 5 through 12, or maybe it's 512. I can't tell from my notes. Is land that is identified for potential park uses as that is vacant or underutilized also land that may be identified in the housing sites inventory for the housing element as land that could be developed for housing in the future? And if so, what is done if the land ultimately is used for one or the other in order to resolve that discrepancy?
Stand up. One sec, we're just repositioning ourselves in the room.
I'll stand and I guess I can take my mask off here. Mariah, to make sure I understand your question, you're saying when we do the housing element inventory, do we also count vacant park sites? Is that your question, or is it the other way around?
I guess it's sort of both, because there's only so many underutilized or vacant parcels of land. And so sometimes we see jurisdictions, they could put the same piece of land in both, and then whichever one gets developed, if it gets developed for housing first or if it gets developed for parks first. So I just want to know if that happens with the city, or if they really segregate, which land they're going to say is for housing and which could be for parks.
Right. So I can start to answer that, and Michelle, maybe not, or if you need to add. But when we do our housing element inventory, we can only look at zoned land within city limits, and as you know, park land that is vacant currently, that's designated in the general plan as parkland, may well have residential zoning because it's got that dual designation happening. So we may count it in the housing element, and we have. Michelle is nodding her head. She's the housing element expert. Yeah, so we may count it, but certainly that decision point about how it gets used happens as Assistant Director Mike Sanchez mentioned, where at such time as if a developer would approach the city and say, I would like to develop this land and I'd like to develop it with housing pursuant to the housing authority, we still would check in and see if the city had the finances to purchase the parkland and if it had the finances to maintain it. If it didn't, then that land would be allowed to be developed for its housing or housing element designation. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I have a follow-up question, which is, so the housing element, has a required no net loss policy. So if the land were to be developed for parks, then you'd have to find other land. Does the city utilize a similar policy for parkland, or if, previously designated parkland ends up being developed into something else? Does the city look to sort of supplement by finding other land to maintain that 3 acres for every 1,000 residents, or is it sort of just like lost until next time there's a master park plan?
Well, I would say that we are, as Michelle mentioned, we're trying to keep our parks inventory updated as much as we can. I would say that because we don't have the state law about the no net loss, that maybe it's not done in as much real time, but I don't know. Yeah, we don't do a no net loss type of implementation with parklands.
Thank you. And then, Carrie, can I ask one more overarching question that I don't know where it fits?
Okay.
So I'm on the Police Reform Commission, and there has been a lot of conversation about police funding and policing as it intersects with parks. And I'm wondering if any of the parks budget goes to policing services, and if so, what percentage or how much?
Christina, hi, can you hop in on that?
Sure. So as far as policing with our police department, we don't have anything in our budget that we pay them for particular services. Their nexus to the Parks Department is usually in relation to special events whereby we have required so many security guards or police officers at special events. But we do contract with private security, and the private security is really used for us trying to minimize damage that occurs to our facilities overnight. So we have primarily those pretty much 7 days a week at our regional parks, from 10 in the evening till about 6 in the morning, where they're patrolling. These are hired security. Again, it's primarily just to minimize the damage that occurs. You'd be surprised of what people will do with our irrigation and stealing copper wire wherever they can, trying to get into our air conditioners on top of our community centers. So it's really that focus of protecting our assets.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Pertaining.
I will just interject though that they are really good partners with us with regard to our community centers and you know, relationship building within the neighborhoods, and you know, trying to have more of a positive interaction. So they are very hands-on with our community special events, and really good partners with us just in you know, connecting with our community. So I do appreciate it. We have a good working relationship with them on that end.
Thank you, Christine. I appreciate that follow-up. Daniel?
Hey, Carrie. And I was just listening to the questions. This might bleed over a little bit with the other slide that we previously covered. I was just going to say I appreciate Mariah's no net loss comment, because that's kind of what I was getting at with my question the first time around, just keeping track of things. I know there was that big subdivision proposal up near the northwest portion of the city where they were talking about taking something like 20 acres of parkland or close to it and converting it to medium density housing. And I was, you know, that's exactly the type of scenario I'm like, okay, so what happens? Does that parkland just vanish into thin air? That's just me talking out loud right now versus a question, direct question. The direct questions I had though, has there ever been any consideration of like a time access level of service standard, or something like how long it takes to get to a park, whether it's pedestrian or whether it's vehicular? Yeah, that would be my question.
Yeah, we have some heads nodding here. Who's gonna? Yep, we're playing musical chairs in the room, so be patient as we have staff rotate.
We are. So if you meant, so we did some studies in the Park Master Plan on access to parks, and the metric that we hoped to attain, or that we looked at, was if within, I believe it was a half a mile of a park. Is that right? Okay, good. And that was considered sort of the maximum walking distance. So we did look at that in the Parks Master Plan, and the plan shows all the area within the city, and maybe out to the sphere, that is within that half mile of a park, or that's not within half mile.
Yeah, Sophia, to that point, I did see that, and I have, you know, some technical, like, minor reservations about that in scenarios where something would be half mile or whatever as the crow flies, but there might not be as accessible, or vice versa, where I don't know if there's a bike path present or something else, something that's beyond a half mile actually has like comparatively good access. I don't know how hard that is to model or plan for. I'm thinking the tools are getting increasingly, easier to pull that off. But because there was some figure in the Parks Master Plan that I was reviewing it that had a kind of a dump of park sites saying, oh, this is, I was specifically looking at the west area saying, all right, this is how we could make sure most of the area is covered by like half-mile radial circles. But it doesn't always, you know, as stuff gets developed, it doesn't always line up that way. And I'm not wholesale opposed to that, but just I don't know, trying to have some, you know, some kind of standard or metric to back that up. It also, I think that's one of those things that also gets baked into the park score too. Sometimes it's distance based, but sometimes they have it like time duration based. So that's I'm not sure if there's any tracking of it right now. That might be something I'd suggest consideration of, but the half-mile radius is better than nothing, because it comes out to somewhere between like a half-mile and 3/4 of a mile, like a 15-minute walking distance.
Right. We did just want to say when we established those, it was the actual half-mile, the actual walking route was considered. So.
Oh, cool. Versus as the crow flies. All right. Yeah.
All right, thank you. John Shelton.
I just wanted to add to the discussion that Mariah had earlier about park space near highways. You've got to be a little bit careful about taking that completely out, because greenways near highways also cut down on the pollution that makes it to the areas on the other side of that. So I agree very much with the idea of the environmental justice of putting parks, especially active use parks, near heavily used freeways. But just kind of remember, my background is an environmental scientist, and some of the work I've done on this also very much shows it cuts down on the pollutants that make it further away from the area. So don't put your soccer fields, don't put your playground equipment right next to the highways, but definitely put trees and other things like the beautification, but potentially just open areas that adds to the ambience of an area. So if you still can work with Caltrans and other highway funds to be able to do some of these, it's a good idea. Just don't do it for active use nearby.
I think that's a great point. Thank you. So back to, let's get back to the freeways, and we're going to move on to the next topic. Was there anything else that you wanted to add about freeway landscaping cleanup, the partnership that the city has with Caltrans? Any updates on that? Rob?
Can I jump in? Can I just jump in response to John? This is Maria.
Let me get my question answered and I'll get back to you, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, Carrie, we've met with Caltrans just like 3 weeks ago to talk about this. And so it is something that we are actively engaged in. I just wanted to note that for the record.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I think the freeway is just like green space. It's a part of our urban setting, and so we all know it's been a struggle. So I appreciate your work on that. Please just hold them accountable. That's all I ask. Looks terrible. Sure. Looks terrible. 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 Just like our parks. All right, Mariah, thank you. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit more to the conversation and the things that John brought up, I do agree that adding in trees and green barriers kind of assists in dropping the emissions. However, it is not, it doesn't eliminate them, and there are very careful considerations that have to be made in terms of what types of vegetation is put in for vegetative barriers, and the city would have to work with specialists in regard to that. I would support a policy for putting open space for beautification purposes, like John was suggesting. But I think that if we're going to do that, I would rather just replace the existing policy, because and just make it very clear that it's for beautification purposes only and not have it open to recreation, just because I think people aren't going to make that realization. Even putting up concrete barrier walls does not stop emissions, because emissions hit the wall and then go up and over the wall based on modeling. So I would only support it if we made a motion to completely eliminate it as anything other than just a beautification space.
All right, thank you. We also have a note from Keith. I'm going to go ahead and read it just in case you haven't seen it. From Keith, what Daniel is bringing up with respect to Western 99 that requires major annexation has major implications with respect to comprehensive fiscal impact analysis as well. So just in case you have not seen the comments, make sure you chime in on that. And for my D1 residents, because I'm a D1 resident as too, and also for some of the folks in the public that are on the line, David, I think it's really important as you see these projects going forward, they're on the planning commission's agenda, the council's agenda, make sure you go to those meetings and let your voices be heard, because we adopted a general plan with parks set aside, and if you feel that it's being, compromised, let your voice be heard, because we don't need them to be changing things. So I know sometimes it's tough to get there, but let it be known already. Okay, we're going to go on to the next part. I think it's 4, correct?
I think it's 3.
Only 3?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Here we go.
Okay. Objective 3, ensure that park and recreational facilities make the most efficient use of land, and they are designed and managed to provide for the entire Fresno community, and they represent positive examples of design and energy conservation. Next slide. And there you see the list of accomplishments, and I'll open it up at that point.
Good. So I think some of the questions that were asked at the last session were actually answered or part of this one. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up to any committee member. Bear with me. I see one hand. 1 moment. Let me see what hand it is. Stacia, how are you? You're up.
Hi, thank you. I can't recall if I actually asked this in my questions before, so that's why I'm asking. For objective 3I in this one, it's the joint use with drainage facilities. To what extent are we actually looking at making these spaces usable? And modeling after, I believe also the Oto Park, for instance, is at a ponding basin. So like, how do we make these spaces basically more usable? Just because I know that's something that folks really push back on when they say like, oh, we're going to get a drainage park, when a drainage park to them is having it not being usable a majority of the year, and having little to no equipment on the site and amenities. So.
Yep, I think that's a great question. In fact, this has come up several times. Is Denise from the Flood Control District on the call? I think she is. Yes, there she is. Denise, hi.
Hi, I unmuted myself.
Oh, we can hear you. Denise, hi, there you go. How are you? Can you hear us? Just a second, everybody. Denise? Okay, we're going to get Denise a second. Barack, did you have something pertaining to this question? Or is your hand still up by mistake?
No, I have something very specific on this item. The city uses a great number of flood control basins throughout the city for active recharge programs. And as there's a comment in the policy here, excuse me, talking about if we do a conversion of a flood control basin to some kind of park facility, there needs to be an offset for recharge. Otherwise, we start losing our recharge capabilities, which are key to our water supply policies.
Thanks.
Agree with that. Denise, any comments to that? Denise? All right, I think we might be having some audio issues with Denise. Okay, thank you for that. Grace, was that helpful? Did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I just want to make people aware of the concern from the water resources perspective of those type of conversions.
Totally agree. I totally agree with you. So.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that concern. I think I'm trying to figure out like, how is it that, this wouldn't be unique to the city of Fresno. So how is it that other cities in areas where it does rain a lot more, like use you know, nature in its design to do that very same thing where, you know, I'm sure Oregon and Washington have some really great models of how to create these like recharge basins that also purifies the water at the same time. So like wondering if the city is looking at any of these models looking at these models and if there's any move towards, you know, implementing anything like this.
So I just wanted to add a couple comments real quickly, Carrie, if I may. So really the intent here for the joint use is similar to what we are trying to take advantage of with our partnership with the schools, is to allow some additional, while it's not maybe the ideal, is to have additional green space available as much as we can be strategic in those partnerships. So these are not intended to be the answer for our park acreage and the need for recognizing the need for additional park acreage. We definitely need to build new parks. I think the idea here is, and I've worked with 2 other agencies, municipalities, and so it is taking advantage of the seasonality of those green spaces, and most certainly as we move forward to any new builds of anything, is that you create a shelf around the top of those recharge basins that can be used year round for maybe just playground or picnic amenities. So I think it is a good partnership, and it does allow us, not maybe the ideal, but it definitely expands the usage during our highest need time, which is summer, for families to have access to green space.
Christina, I also think that there are basins that often get filled during the summer to allow for recharge. I know several in Fresno that were empty a week ago are completely full now, and that's specifically for recharge. Is that correct?
So
Hi, everybody. This is sorry. This is Denise. I lost you guys earlier. Sorry about that.
Thank you for being on. Yes.
Sure thing. Yeah, definitely. What was being brought up, like you said, our basins are basically for recharge and for stormwater purposes. And during those summer months, we do offer some of our basin sites to be utilized for things such as like baseball fields or soccer fields. Currently, we do have 2 fully developed basin locations that we do offer those, you know, like tot lots and play fields and whatnot. And so we do, when we develop new basin sites, we'll reach out to the city of Fresno to try to get a dual purpose use on those basins that we're proposing. And so I don't know if that helps.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Any follow-up questions from the committee? I see Mariah's up, but Gracie, did you have anything else?
I mean, I guess my question is simply like, it seems like maybe the answer is no, but if we're actually being proactive and intentional about, like, you know, innovative solutions that have worked in other places to develop these, because I think it's an opportunity, you know, it's hard to, it's a long time coming to actually create new parks in some of these existing communities, but we have ponding bases already there. So how do we leverage that, and how do we do that? So I think just trying to get us into that direction of, like, we need to be proactive and really start looking at potentially these as solutions, but really usable parks, and not, you know, like, I'm thinking of Oso de Oro, like parks like that folks I think would want to see.
Yep. I think it's a super complicated problem we have right now regarding parks. So Mariah, did you want to hop on in?
Yeah, I just want to, so I really appreciate this conversation. I work in a rural community that one of the only green spaces that they have is one of these ponding basins. So I hear a lot about it from them. And it's not within the city, but it's the same issue. And so I'm happy to hear that going forward, the city is going to look for dual uses and try and incorporate some of those important components. You know, one of the things that I hear the most is that, you know, in the community that I work in, it's also an area that doesn't have any kind of walking trails or safe places for people to exercise. And so they've been pushing to have a exercise path put around the top of the basin with like lighting and things like that for safety. And one of the things that I think, you know, getting to Gracie's point, that the city could potentially do, and maybe there could be a policy for this, is to proactively seek grant funding for refurbishing of these parks to include some of these additional amenities. Because there is money that comes from the state. We had Prop 68. There's urban greening money that could be used to help with, bring in landscape architects and help change and reimagine how to use these spaces. So I would like to see a policy that explicitly says that the city will seek to find funding opportunities or other types of partnerships that can be created to reimagine the existing spaces that we have instead of just spaces going forward.
All right, thank you. Folks, we have T-minus 19 minutes to go before folks have to chime off. So we're going to take one last question for this, and we're going to go on to the next part. Darius?
Just really quick, tagging along Mariah's point, there's lots of funding that used to be available. I believe it's still an active transportation plan from the state that could help fund cycle tracks and active transportation. So again, cycle tracks, trails, and then having equipment along the trails, obviously low maintenance equipment for exercise and activities. Just if the city hasn't already looked into those, please take a look at the ATP funds.
Appreciate that. I just a thoughtful comment is grant monies are great to put infrastructure in, but we need to solve the structural deficit of maintaining our current infrastructure and enhancing our current infrastructure. We owe a great deal of gratitude to those before us to protect that investment. So while new is amazing, it is absolutely amazing. We need to be planning for it. We also need to be planning for replacement and repair of existing infrastructure. So there's a balance between one-time grant money and then ongoing maintenance. So I know that you guys are all aware of that. All right, we're going to go on to the next section.
Hey, Gary, Carrie. Gary Giannetta's had his hand up for a while.
Who?
Gary Giannetta, he physically.
Oh, Gary, I purposely ignored you. You could hit me later. Gary, thank you for that. Gary?
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. Question I have for Denise, I guess the city also, is when we have these dual use ponding basins, what's the funding for acquiring the ponding basins, improving them, and maintaining those ponding basins that are dual use?
Well, the dual use basins with the agreement with the city of Fresno is like simply it's just for those summer months. They're open to the public and it only allows for green space. I want to say the district does maintain the green space, like as far as the mowing and so forth. And so that's, like you said, parks are really expensive and, flood control is not really a park business. And so we try to just work with the city on that. And so basically the funding is, I don't really think there is a funding. I don't know if anyone from the city is aware of anything like that in regards to these dual use basins.
The question would be, that's land and the land was purchased. So
right.
How was the land purchased? In other words, there had to be a lot of money spent for the land.
Yeah, the land is purchased and owned by the district, and so it's part of our general fund.
How was it funded to be purchased?
It's part of our drainage fee structure, and so all land that the district purchases is included as part of the drainage fee structure.
So the drainage fee structure, where does the money come from for that drainage fee?
That basically is through development, once developers pay their portion of their drainage fees, and so that gets respread for ponding basins, for our storm drain facilities, for landscaping, street lights, and so forth.
So basically, where the funds come from to buy the land and to improve the land is from development fees. That's got a dual use as a park.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was my question.
I want to chime in on the park improvements. When we talk about park improvements like playgrounds and things like that, that is on the city's, and Tony, chime in if I'm misspeaking here, but any of those elements, the city funds and our responsible for maintaining those improvements. The improvements that I believe Denise is speaking to are explicit to the flood control needs with their operations, their equipment, their pumps, and all those things those improvements come from those fees. Any park amenities are funded through the city and through a variety of funding sources that we can either get grants and or general fund dollars for improving those. And our staff, as Denise mentioned, in the summer months, we transfer those responsibilities of general maintenance to the city. So any of the restrooms that are out there, our staff, park staff are cleaning those, graffiti being removed, fences that are cut, you know, all of those things that are within the facility that are damaged during our public use falls on the city's dime and staff to get corrected and repaired.
So basically what happens, the purchase of the land, the development of the land, the improvements around the land are all paid for through development fees.
Only the ponding basin functions. The park amenities and recreation are funded through the city.
But the city, the parks isn't spending any money on purchasing land
No.
or improving the property. The development fees are.
The improvements, if there's a playground structure, that is what an improvement that the city would have funded.
Yeah, and so the purchases for those ponding basins is for a specific volume of water retention. They don't buy additional land to accommodate the park. So it's a matter of if they have the capacity to put some type of feature in there in the higher basin. Usually they're benched. But you know, when we have them for recharge purposes, we have better success with the whole basin being dedicated to recharge. Right. And then too, I would just note there are occasions when we, the Department of Public Utilities, works with flood control and may buy additional land if it's available at the time, so that we can even further expand the basin to further enhance our recharge activities. So there's a list between flood control and the city that is maintained and designates the basins as either recharge or dual purpose. And that's visited on occasion, but it's extremely hard to make changes because of the implications to the recharge program. But I just want to also note, we are, you know, eager to work cooperatively with all the agencies to make things happen. And maybe there's other opportunities with new basins that are constructed where that's easier to do, but the conversion of existing ones is more complicated.
Thank you. Thank you. Sal?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I guess I think what Mr. Giannetta was really reflecting on is that as a community, the acquisition of the real estate for the basins has been, that investment has been made once. And as we look at the scarcity of what we might say real estate for the purposes of open space or green space, trails, et cetera, is that the acquisition of the investment has been made once, and wouldn't it be thoughtful for us to, I understand that these were with the intent at one point in the city's or this community's history as single purpose facilities. However, given what we need, and many of those basins are in areas that are in critical and challenged neighborhoods, that we really look into the repurposing and the dual use facility. There's nothing more spectacular than going to Oso de Oro and trying to replicate. I understand that the intent in the original construction of those facilities was single purposed. However, we have areas in Southeast and Southwest Fresno that are just dying for park space in the central area of this urban core, and we have those basins there. And it seems to me that we ought to be crafting or recrafting as a general plan implementation committee the notion of how do we better utilize the real estate that this community originally invested in. I just echo Mr. Giannetta's comments. There'll be additional funding needed for the purpose of the equipment, but making sure that we use our real estate efficiently that we've already acquired is something I think to give further thought to, and then a lot of action. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, very good point. Thank you very much. And just a quick question for staff. I have two. In the park master planner, do we include the recharge basins as a potential location for parks? Wait, all right. So the park. So we got to guess.
Oh, you mean for plan?
For plan.
No, we don't.
Okay. So, all right. So in the current park master plan, we do not. We just got word that we do not include existing water basins for planned parks. Planned ones. Planned. Yeah, we know we have existing, but planned. So,
but it is a strategy that we have identified through the park master plan. To the point that the gentleman just made is that by large and far, the overwhelming communication from our community is let's improve first what we already own, and secondarily look at those opportunities of joint use before we're having to invest new dollars for new parks. That let's try to be mindful with our limited resources. And then to your point, I think early on, Carrie, is the grants are great for giving us the ability to build something, but we are $5 million behind the ball right now with our current park operations that we need just to get to a level 1 standard of maintaining what we currently have. So while we all recognize that we are far behind on park acreage, we need to figure out first how we can get resources to maintain what we currently own and operate.
Okay, I agree with you. Last point on this topic.
Commissioner,
Yes.
can you call the Federal Reserve for that?
What?
Can you call the Federal Reserve? They're printing, I hear they're printing, giving out lots of money.
Actually, I have for a moment of levity, if you could just offer me your credit card, I think we could solve the backlog, Darius. So since you're very generous, so I think if you could help us fix this problem tomorrow, that would be great. And I just want to be thoughtful of a question that was a ha ha ha. I'm not really kidding though. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. For Jill that's on the call, and then we'll move on. The ATP grant, is the city actively pursuing the grant that's, I think it's due in September, or anybody else that might be able to answer that question?
Yeah, good morning, this is Jill. Yes, we are right now assembling projects and working to identify the projects and working to pull those grants together.
That's great. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure I saw that, so thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the next policy, please.
Objective number 4, pursue sufficient and dedicated funding for parks acquisition, operations, and maintenance.
Okay, great. Super concise, folks. We've had a lot of conversation. All of it's blended over. Sal, your hand's up. Sal. So I just wanted to double check. All right, if you wanted to ask a question. Okay, Gracia?
I just have a quick question. I know we've been having a lot of discussion around maintenance costs and just not having enough funding. Have we looked, or has the city looked at similar sized cities and compared certain budget expenditures and how much we're spending in parks departments relative to other cities, and you know whether we want to make it a goal to get to a certain expenditure that to similar sized cities?
I will tell you that if everybody's paid attention to all the budget deliberations with the council, the answer would be yes. So I don't think it's specifically stated in the general plan, but I think there's been a lot of conversation at the council level on per capita spending. Correct. But no set amount has been agreed.
And Christina might help.
Christina, did you want to, is she on the call? Sorry. Christina, did you want to jump in on that? Of course you're on the call, sorry.
No, that's fine. I would just say, you know, through the answer is yes, we see what other communities are doing. I'll reference back to our park master plan whereby, you know, the minimum that I would say other communities, if you take an average I believe was $7,500 to $10,000 per acre, and we're spending $2,500 per acre per year. So, you know, I always like to use the analogy, think of your own, if you have a gardener or landscaper at your house, how much do you spend a month just to have them do your yard? And then think about per acre, only $2,500 a year that we're expending for maintaining our turf and all of the other amenities and everything. So it's pretty profound how underfunded we are. And you know, it's just a reality that we're hopeful that through the park master plan, and as mentioned, our council is, you know, advocating for parks, and we are all, as the city at large, under-resourced for our operations. And so we just need to be creative. And a lot of the things that we're talking about today are those creative thoughts of, you know, taking advantage of existing park sites that, or land that can be modified into park sites. It may not be our ultimate ideal of, yes, we still need to work towards getting actual dedicated parks, but in the interim, let's be as creative as we can with partnerships and use of existing land.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to 5.
Objective number 5, provide for long-term preservation, enhancement, and enjoyment of plant, wildlife, and aquatic habitat.
Open this up for conversation. Going once, going twice. See no hands. Thank you. Moving on.
Hey, wait.
You work fast. All right, go right ahead.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so I had some questions from a conservationalist and a nonprofit on this. So the first question is, to what degree is the city of Fresno incorporating native plants and habitat restoration into the maintenance of existing parks and then the design of new parks?
Christina?
I would say that that is primarily being addressed to any of our new parks or new development that is occurring, that those things are taken under consideration and are included in our design elements. Come in.
So is the city doing any habitat restoration?
I don't believe that we are. So I'll let Tony chime in. I know we do some maintenance, but I don't know that we're actively doing any. Tony, are you still on the line?
John?
Yeah, so this is John Shelton with the San Joaquin River Conservancy. So for ecosystem habitat, we have actually funded the city at River Bottom. We funded the river partners to do a restoration project at River Bottom, one of the city's areas. And we've got some processes going on down at the River West. So we have been doing that in cooperation with the city when we're using city lands, but also to address the idea of using native plants. In our master plan update, which is listed on here, we have suggested best management practices for using native species. And we usually, when we do our grant funds, we actually make sure that whenever we're doing any of this, that we make sure we pay attention to our master plan, because that's our overriding CEQA document on this. But there are other opportunities that we have with the city and others to be able to do similar things within our geographic area. So.
Great, thank you. Similar question, to what degree is the city of Fresno incorporating climate resilience in the maintenance of existing parks and the design of new parks?
So climate resilience, as far as like with our partnership with Tree Fresno, we've planted over 1,000 trees to try to include shade, and that was one of the things that I think was also pretty profound that came out of our park master plan. I think we're at like 13% of shade in our parks. So that's one of our critical areas of existing parks that we're trying to find funding, and again, partnership like with Tree Fresno to restore some of that through those grants. And there were, and I can't speak directly to this before my time here with the city, but I do believe that the city lost a lot of trees, you know, citywide, not just in the parks, with regard to drought and other issues. So I think Public Works also has a plan for like the street trees, and I can't speak to that though. I'm not real familiar with that.
Okay.
Can I chime in on that?
John, I was going to ask you to chime in, John. And housekeeping, please don't anybody log off. It's 11 o'clock. We're going to move this meeting so we get to the motion. So John, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it pretty quick. We do have aspects of climate resiliency for the parkway along the river, but I just want to make sure it's very important to understand also a big part of the resiliency for the San Joaquin River Parkway is to get structures out of the floodplain. All the studies we've done on hydrology let us know that the 100-year floodplain is something of the past, and we expect our major floods in the future to be even greater than the 100-year events. And the 100-year events, like the 1997 one we had, flooded out quite a few homes and other things along there. So that's another part of the climate resiliency. I think also the idea of the mitigation of planting and other things is very important, but the more we can do to avoid impacts by not building within floodplains, but also creating things that can last for a while, I think is very important. So.
Mariah, we need to go on to the next topic. Can we come back to this stuff? Because people are starting to drop off, and I don't want to lose them.
Yes, and I submitted these, so I can also just wait for written.
I appreciate that. We did get them. I'll make sure we get them answered. Okay, we're going on to 6.
6, maintain and restore where feasible the ecological values of the San Joaquin River corridor.
Any questions regarding these objectives and policies? Seeing none, moving on to the next.
Objective 7, support the San Joaquin River Conservancy and its collaborative multi-agency efforts to develop the San Joaquin River Parkway.
Any questions from the committee regarding these items? I think actually we've talked about a lot of it throughout the meeting. There being none, we're going to move right on. I think we've already done 8.
Yeah.
So thank you. So what we're going to do now is go into motions. So I'm going to open up the floor, and if there are any motions out there that are still pending on the floor, Mariah, you're up first.
All right, so I've got a few. So my first motion is to create a no net loss policy for parkland in the city of Fresno, so that when parkland is converted into other uses or land that is, previously held as being available for parkland is converted to other uses such as housing, that the city identifies similar acreage for parkland.
Adequate replacement. Okay, motion 2. Oh, is there I'm sorry, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dan. Motion 2.
The second motion is for the city to include a policy to promote retrofitting pre-existing water basins, recharge basins that are currently being used as park space.
Is there a second? Need a second, folks, or it's going to go nowhere.
I'll second.
Who's that? Grace. All right. Thank you. Motion.
The third is to remove the policy for citing freeway parks, parks next to freeways.
I'll second that.
And the last would be a policy that explicitly states that the city will actively seek ATP funding and state park funding.
I don't know if that's a general plan actual motion. Jennifer, are you on? Okay, we'll go ahead, but I don't think we need to have I don't think we have to have that in the general plan, but just for the sake of process, we'll go ahead and put it in and we'll get clarification later. Is there a second to that?
This is Keith, I'll second.
Thank you.
And that's all of mine, thank you.
That's very, very thorough. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right. Is there any other committee member that has any additional motions? We know we got Darius's motion earlier before he had to leave. Gracia, please.
So I wanted to make the motion, and I would like to hear from folks at the San Joaquin River Conservancy. But for POS, for Objective 6, it says maintain and restore where feasible the ecological values of the San Joaquin River corridor. I would just like to remove the where feasible, because I think we should be doing as much as possible to that. So it's just, you know, vernacular, but wanted to, first I'd like to ask the San Joaquin River Conservancy if that's something that makes sense, or if it's pretty good the way it is now.
John, did you want to chime in on that?
I don't think it really matters one way or the other, because we always look at feasibility as we're doing things, but I agree with the sentiment. This needs to be done, and I think we can go either direction on those.
Okay, would you like to say?
I'll just rescind it then if John doesn't see it. I don't want to put anything just to put it in there. So if it's not necessarily going to be useful for them, then.
So you're going to rescind that motion, okay? Do you have any other motions for today?
Yeah, the other one was just wanted to add a new policy implementation to Objective 1, where essentially, and I think I might have already sent Shell this language, but it's creating healthy communities and poorly placed parks. So sorry, I'm gonna have to widen my screen a little bit. I can't read my thing. Strategies to improve existing parks near unhealthy uses, and it should be developed with the surrounding community that could improve health impact for those using the parks. And that's for existing parks that are placed in, you know, poorly placed areas, such as freeways or industrial facilities. So like, you know, maybe creating a green barrier. And then similarly, parks on council landfills will be discussed with the community to identify what solutions the residents would like to see come out of toxic green spaces that exist. And so this is solely for existing park spaces.
I'm looking at it right. Did they already capture that? Questions?
I think so. Did I hear two things? For existing parks and unhealthy areas, look at green barriers. That was what the first one was?
Well, it was to develop strategies that would mitigate those impacts. So I used the green barriers as an example.
Okay.
And then the second portion to that was for parks that are on top of landfills or potentially toxic sites to, again, identify with, both of these are with community, identify solutions as far as what should happen to those sites. And, you know, I'm thinking about like the regional sports complex on Jensen and Hyde Park in next to Edison High School. So.
Yeah, okay. We got it.
Okay, we got it. Is there a second? I need a second.
I can second. This is Mariah. Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do you have any other motions, or are we set?
That is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, I see your hand up. Is your hand just up to say hi?
No, that was from before. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, that's okay if you want to say hi. All right, folks, we have our motions in the bucket. As a reminder, we have our meeting in 2 weeks. That will be on the 18th in the evening on the housing element. As a reminder, we will, after that, be having some housekeeping meetings to kind of go over questions that were not answered, motions. We want to make sure we are very clear with all the motions. And then we'll be looking at all the recommendations again to see what might be realistic, what might not be realistic, what needs additional analysis. So I want you all to be really comfortable in knowing that we're not going to rush through this housekeeping items. We'll make sure we're very thorough so we could all be on the same page as much as possible. Please have Drew and his wife in your thoughts and prayers, and congratulations on his arrival of his new daughter. And with that, for the good of the committee, if there's any other questions, I will say goodbye. I'll give you, and have a great week. And remember to wash your hands and to say hello to your neighbor and to wear your mask. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Be able to copy all the comments.